Welcome everyone. This is the second PowerApps user group meeting. My name is Andy Tabas, and I'll put on my here my email address in case you want to reach out to me. And my Twitter is AccessWisdom, even though we're working with PowerApps. And so what I want to do is just kind of talk a little bit about what PowerApps is and what PowerApps isn't, and then we'll go directly into our demonstration. And today, what I've decided to do is each month I'm going to use a different source. So last month we used SharePoint lists as a back end. This time we're going to use Google Sheets as the back end, and we'll talk a little bit about those as well. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to show you some common problems that I've run into with that, and then we'll also go into showing how to add audio and how to edit different forms and different things like that. So that's what that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the first thing, just to kind of talk about what Power is the primary use of PowerApps is basically extending your current data, your current corporate data, to mobile devices. So if you have, there's tons of different data sources that you can use, everything from SQL and Azure and Dynamics and things like that, but you can also use things like Facebook or Pinterest or MailChimp, or other sources like that, Google Email, Google Spreadsheets, all those different kinds of data sources. So you can use that. The one caveat to keep in mind is that when you're designing PowerApps, you have to use a corporate email address. And by corporate, I just mean it can't be Gmail or Hotmail or CompuServe, any of the AOL, those kind of things. They have to actually be a real corporate address. And so today, what I'll be working with is Andy at Office 365 Day, which is I put together Office 365 Day, which is it's kind of like a SQL Saturday or SharePoint Saturday. It's a one-day event where we're going to have a bunch of different speakers. Several of them are MVPs, and and there will be like 15 sessions total, so it'll be a lot of fun. And that's April 1st in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So we'll be using the Office365day.org as the sign-in. The PowerApps work on iPhone and Android and Windows. And one of the things that I really like about PowerApps is that once you basically create that app. Once you've created that app, you need to submit it to the store, and then either Apple or Google, check it out, make sure everything's good, that it doesn't have viruses, stuff like that, and then they approve it. And with PowerApps, you do the process. With PowerApps, you can once you have the PowerApps app loaded on your phone, then you can load any kind of app within that. And so the example that I've used in the past is like Microsoft Excel does not care what kind of a spreadsheet you're using. It doesn't care whether you are have a list of to-do items, or you have a balance sheet, or you have a list of recipes. It really doesn't care what that list is, or a list of DVDs or whatever. Excel doesn't care what you're running inside of Excel, but Excel is the shell. The same thing with PowerApps. So PowerApps is what you install on your phone, and then once it's installed on your phone, then you can create your own apps and run it underneath that. And then the last thing I just kind of want to touch on is that PowerApps is not a replacement for Access Web Apps. Even though we're running PowerApps as part of the under the Access User Groups family, it is a separate entity. You can connect your PowerApp to Access Web App data, which is basically Azure type data, but you can also connect it to SQL and SharePoint lists and things like that. At this point, PowerApps does not have a direct capability to utilize a .accdb file and an ACDB, which is AccessDB, or an MDB, Microsoft database. It doesn't have the capability of connecting to any of those at this point. So right now, Microsoft is recommending that you move that data either to SQL or Azure or SharePoint lists or Access Web Apps and handle it that way. There's a lot of different strengths and weaknesses between Access Web Apps and PowerApps. I kind of explained that at the last meeting, so I'm not going to go into that this time. But this is totally open forum, so as we're going through this, feel free to ask questions and things, or I think Lucy will be following the chat window, so if you ask questions on chat, either she'll be replying back to you, or toward the end of the meeting we may handle a bunch of questions at that time, so we can handle everything that we want to get it accomplished today. And so there are two PowerApps environments. One is the web studio environment, and then the other one is the desktop app environment. The desktop, and they call it PowerApp Studio for web, or PowerApp Studio for either Windows 10 or desktop or something like that. On this machine, I'm running Windows 7, so I cannot use the desktop app. The desktop app requires at least Windows 8.1 or Windows 10 to run, and I just don't have that on this machine. So there's going to be one thing on here that I'll be showing how you can do this on in the browser, but the final part of it actually a Surface Pro that I on, and so it's much easier for me to work with different monitors. So so let's go ahead and get started. This is the PowerApps web environment, and over on the left-hand side, we've got apps, connections, flows, gateways, and notifications. The three that we really care about here are apps, which are the Power App that we create. In this case, we're gonna build a Power App that's connected to a Google Sheet, and then we've got connections, which is the Google Sheet itself, and then we've got flows. And flows are basically automation that you can add to your apps, and generally the way it works is, let's say we can build a flow, and what that flow does is it creates an email and sends it through Gmail or sends it through Outlook or something like that. So you can build that capability as a flow, and then you add that capability to your app. That's kind of how that works. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and start with connections here. And I've got some here, but we're going to create some of our own connections so you can kind of see how it goes. And so here I've got 3 different connections, but in the top right, I'm going to click on New Connection. And by the way, you can click on New App and create the connection with that. I just prefer to build the connections. Got the we're going to connect to a Google Sheet. So let me build. Hold on a second. I'm I'm going to do this. I'm going to create and so I'm going to call this 01 Michigan Chambers, and let me grab some to throw in there. Hold on just a second. Let me grab some data here. I don't need to grab everything, but I'll grab a good chunk of it. Okay, good. And I'm going to get rid of this because we don't need that for what we're doing. Okay, so now we've got these fields in here. We've got chamber name, contact name, email address, contact us form, and contact data. I'm going to start off with having this the way we normally would work on these, where we have spaces in between. So we've got chamber name, contact name, form, and contact data. And so we've just kind of got a simple spreadsheet set up here. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this, and now we're going to click on new connection in the top right, and you can see there's a lot of different choices here. There's just dozens and dozens of choices here. In this case, we're going to go down to Google Sheets and use that, and we're going to go ahead and do that. Create. And that's fine. We'll allow that. And notice here I'm logged in to my Google Sheet as Andy at WorkSmartDB.com, and so we have that. You can also set up, if you were using an Excel sheet, you would throw that either in Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox or something like that, and then you can access the Excel data that way. And so, but in this case, what we have here is going to be fine for what we're working with. Okay, and so once we have that, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new app. So we're going to click on the plus new app at the bottom left. It's asking us which one do we want to run. We're going to use Studio for Web. And then it's going to take us in here, create an app in Office 365 Day. It shows us some common data sources. We're actually going to hit the right arrow, and so in here we can choose our Google Sheets. And in this case, I'm going to choose 01 Michigan Chambers and Sheet 1. And so now what it does is it takes a look at that sheet and tries to determine what's the best way of laying out that information. Is it, do we want to have name first, last name first, things like that? And I'm getting a little bit of feedback from someone. So if you may need to mute your microphone. All right, perfect. And so this is the PowerApps interface, and what it does is it automatically creates 3 different forms. And the first one is, and they call them screens, but this first one is your searchable, filterable form that lists. It's from an Access Web App standpoint, it's kind of like your list form, your list view. The second one is a view only, so you can see the view only, and the reason why I wanted to put those spaces back in is this is what happens when you have spaces. And so it's like, okay, why exactly is that happening? And what happens is the static name, it converts the values of specific characters to, in this case, a space is converted to X0020, and that's how it's done. And so you have to be cognizant of that. We're going to go back and change the spreadsheet and redo it so it looks better, so it imports okay. But you can either have like chamber name as one word. They call that Camelcase because it's a capital C, capital N. And then, so we can do it that way, or we could do chamber underline name. We could do it that way as well. But I wanted to point this out. This doesn't hurt anything to be that way, but what we'd have to do is go in and rename all those, which is a bit, we don't want to have to do that every time we use that as a data source. So we want to fix the spreadsheet to begin with. So this is the view only, and then you can see a little pencil here. When you hit the pencil, you're taken to this view, which is the edit view, and this is where you can edit the different fields that you have. And then if we want to see this in action, up here there's a little arrow which is run. So we're going to run this app, and so you can see what this form looks like. We'll go back, and actually let's do this. I'm going to close out of that. Let's go back to the first one. And so this is what it looks like on your phone. They do have different styles for tablets as well, or Windows, browser windows, things like that. But in this case, I set it up to use I've got an iPhone 6s, and so I'm just using that. And so in here, this is where we can search for data. And I can type in, Smith, and I didn't hit enter or anything. I just typed in letters. So as you type in letters, it's automatically narrowing it down based on that. So here we've got SM, here we've got SM, and so that's why both of these filtered. If we wanted to go to the next pane, the view, we would click on this little arrow that takes us to the next one. This is read only. When I click on edit, it actually takes us to that third view, which is an actual separate screen to edit. And I know that's kind of a little bit of a pain. I suggest to, and they just, if it's an editable one by default, and then if they're just viewing it, they can just make those read-only kind of fields. But so we'll see. I don't know. I think from their standpoint, in some cases, the view might want to see some information. In the edit, you may see other information, like adding on a map or something. So in here, I can either hit the escape key. I'm going to hit escape, which takes us back to the design window. Or I could have used this X here to close the design window. Now, make sure that you do this X and not this one. If you do this one, you're closing out of PowerApps altogether. So either hit escape or click on that X to close it out. So we're gonna go back, and we're actually going to close out of this app. I'm not going to save it. And what we're going to do is we're going to re-edit that Excel sheet again. Pull it over here, and so I'm gonna we can either, like I said, we can either use underlines or we can get rid of it altogether. In this case, I'll just go ahead and add an underline under each of them, just so that we have that. I just wanted to point that out, because if you design an Excel or a Google sheet, and all of a sudden you're getting, you're like, why are we getting this X0200 on everything? And the other thing I want to point out is, after we turned it into PowerApps, notice what it did. It added its own PowerApps ID, which didn't exist before, and so this is an ID that's built into PowerApps, and that's how it keeps those records straight. And in actuality, let's go ahead and we can get rid of it. It'll automatically recreate it for us. All right. Hit home so we get back home. All right. So we've got that. Let me move this off my screen, and we're going to do this again. So we're going to go in, and again, we've got the connection already made, so we don't need to create that connection again. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a new app, we can do a phone layout or tablet layout. In this case, we're going to choose Google Sheets again. 01 Michigan Chambers, Sheet 1. Choose Connect in the bottom right. It's going to automatically build your app. And there we have it. Now, what's kind of interesting is that I've played around with naming fields with underlines as well as Camelcase, without basically like. Let me give you an example of Camelcase real quick, just so, because I've talked about it first. If I have contact name, this is Camelcase because the C is capitalized. That's why it's called that. Because when I'm talking with Jack, he already knows these things, and so I don't, sometimes those of us that have been programming for 20, 30 years, we just kind of take it for granted, and so that's kind of how we are. So we're going to go ahead and edit this information. I'm going to go ahead and show you when I click on this view. Notice chamber name has that underline that we added, so the fields look a little bit better than what we had before. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work on editing this form. And so in here, this is kind of one of my pet peeves that I don't like about this is that on here, this is the first different alphabetically sorted by the field here, and perhaps I want to have this sorted by which box I'm in, but we can't do that. So here, because here now we've got the name, I want to change this to the chamber name. Whoops. But even though I've changed that to chamber name, these didn't resort alphabetically. But so we're going to do chamber name, and then I'm going to change this to the person contact name, and then in this one I'm going to change this to the email address, and I think this one is, let's change this to contacted by. We'll do that. And that field isn't filled in. But this is kind of one interesting thing is this second field, it makes it blue compared to the other ones. And so if I didn't want this to be blue, I could make this black. So I can choose the color, move this down, and that's interesting that it doesn't. But oops, isn't that black? Where's black all zeros? I thought black was. No, that's not it. It's all zeros. Sorry, it's all zeros instead of all Fs. All Fs must be white. And so we've got this, and you can see it's kind of cutting off the word, but then we've got who the contact name is, and we've got the email address. So the next thing I want to kind of show you is, you may not like the way this Adrian area chamber is, because you're not able to see all of that information. And so in order to play around with that, we're over on the advanced tab here. We're going to click on advanced, and then inside of this advanced tab, hold on a second. Inside of this advanced tab, you've got different properties here, and so you've got things like on select. You've got the text You've got the line height, and then down below that, you've got a couple interesting fields. One is overflow, and one is auto height. What overflow does is it allows you to put in a scroll. So the like Excel does, it automatically shows you what your next available fields are. So if I do overflow dot, I can either choose hidden or scroll. So I'm going to go ahead and choose scroll. What that does is it converts this to a little scroll bar here. And so now let's go ahead and run this. And so now you've got Adrian area, and I've got a little I've got a little scroll bar there. So we can do that. The other thing we could do is, and I'm going to put that as hidden again. You've got auto height, and so we can change the auto height to be true, and now it'll make that field bigger. The problem is that we've still got this field, which is kind of in the way, and we've got the other field. So I'm going to, for now, I'm going to get rid of that bottom field. We're going to move this one down, and we're going to move this one. And notice the design is similar to what we have in PowerPoint, where when you're lining up controls in PowerPoint, it automatically shows you what those are. So you've got things like that. Now, here's my second pet peeve, is that we've got Adrian Area Chamber of Commerce, we've got Albion Chamber here, things like that. Now, if I go back to auto height and I change this to false and hit enter, it's still leaving the size as that height. And so I actually have to go back in here and change that to fit that. And then here we're going to put this back as scroll. And so now you can kind of see the top of it, and you can kind of scroll up and down. But here, let's see if we can adjust that just a tiny bit more. So now it'll do it without chopping it off. But the thing what I don't like about that is that you're changing it to auto height. When you take auto height off, it doesn't go back to the way it had been. So there are some little things that you, as you're working with this information, you'll kind of get used to that kind of stuff. This line height will not change whether it's auto height or not. So just you can kind of keep that in mind as well. So speaking of that issue, like I consider that to be a bit of a bug, that when you change auto height back to false, that it doesn't adjust that. And so one thing I wanted to point out here is that if you ever run into this way, put this back, and so there is, if you run into a problem like that, or you find a bug, there's a website, PowerApps.com. I'm sorry, PowerApps.Microsoft.com, and then ENUS and support. When we go into that, you'll see a page, and down below, you'll see submit an idea and report an issue. In my case, I need to record that as a bug. I would consider that a bug, and so that's that's where you do that. So PowerApps.Microsoft.com. You can choose support. You can come up here and choose support. It takes you to the same place. So close out of that. All right. Yeah, cool. All right, good. So now the next thing we might want to do with this, I'm going to move this up a little bit, is we've got this email address, which is great, but whether we're in this view, and let me run it again. If I'm here, I'm in search view. If I click on here, we can see the email address, which doesn't do anything. If I go into edit, we've got the email address, which still doesn't take me anywhere. And so this is a good case where Microsoft Flow is something that we could add an email address. So, and before I get into Flow, does anybody have any questions? I know I've been rambling a little bit. So does anybody have any questions while we're going through this? All right, good. All right, so I didn't check these out to begin with. So Sandy, hi, new to this group, looking forward to checking out. Great. Lisa said welcome. Awesome. Giorgio. Don't understand why the window cannot be maximized to full screen in Skype for Business. On mine it is maximized, so I'm not sure, Giorgio, what you're running into. Oh, and so Jack responded back to him, use the double arrow icon. So he must be in the, there's a double arrow within Skype for Business that you can do that. So, all right, cool. Good. So, yeah, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to add them to the chat window. Everyone's on mute. So, yeah, Lucy just said everyone's on mute, so you have questions, go ahead and type it in the chat window. All right, we're going to go ahead and start working on go into Flow a little bit. And if I do see questions pop up in conversation, we'll jump on those. So in the way Flow works is I'm going to go ahead and save this. And let's call it we'll just call it PowerApps Users Group 2.15.17. That way it's there later on, in case anybody wants to look at it later. Okay, and then next what we're going to do is we're going to jump into Flow. So we're going to go back. I'm going to click on File, takes us back here, and we're going to go into Flows here. And within Flows, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new one. I've got one here that we're going to kind of replicate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create from blank, and it automatically creates this. Right now it's called PowerApps button. That's not a very good title for it. So we're going to send email from within PowerApps, just to call it something a little bit different than before. We're going to go ahead and click on New Step. And under New Step, it says add an action or a condition. You've got other choices here. We're going to add an action. And then it gives you a lot of different choices here. Again, what you want to do. In our case, we're going to go down to Gmail. We're going to choose Send Email. And then it's going to ask me to sign in. Oops. And we'll allow that. And one thing to point out is that you may be asking, okay, how did it automatically know that I wanted to use that email? And so when you hit on the three dots, I was already connected to my email through, we run WorkSmartDV.com through Google, and so we use that environment. And so with this, I'm already connected with Gmail, and that's why it already knew that. If I wasn't connected, it would step me through putting in my login name and my password and things like that. Or if you want to use something different, you can click on the three, click on Add New Connect, and you can do it that way as well. And so now we've got an email. So it's got your to, and when you click on the to, add dynamic content already shows up here. So if I was sending it to Jack, I could put Jack's email here if I'm always sending it to Jack. If I'm not, what I want to do is I want to click on Ask in PowerApps, and then it's going to grab the field within PowerApps that we're going to kind of connect it to. So we've got the to, we can add in a subject, and again, these are all in here. So if I add dynamic content here, we've got send mail subject. If I want to do that in the body, we've got send mail body, email body. Whoops, hit it a second time. You got the attachment's name, attachment's content type, and you've got some advanced options which we're not going to get into. So this is a very simple flow that we're creating. And so we're going to go ahead and click on Create Flow here. And now up at the top left, you can see Saving Flow. Your flow is created. To exit, click Done. So we're going to go ahead and click on Done. And so now we've got that. We just added this flow here. Send Gmail from within PowerApps. So we've got that in here. If we can turn it off if we don't want to make that available. You can you go in and edit it, hit the three dots, edit it again, so you can do things like that. All right, cool. And so now we've got that flow already built. So now we can go back to Home. We can go back into our PowerApps that we've built. It's reloading it. I ran it instead of, hold on, I gotta move this bar. It's weird. All right, we can go back to it this way. And so in here is where we normally would have, where normally we would now want to add that flow to this. And so in order to do this, you click on Action, and then within here is, I believe it's Action, within here is where you actually see the flow as a choice. In this case, we don't see flow as a choice because we are in the web-based, and this is kind of what I kind of alluded to early on in this, is that when you build, when you add a flow, you can build the flow using what the web-based version, but you can't add a flow to an app in that. So just if you're going to add a flow, make sure you do that part using a computer with Windows 8.1 and Windows 10, where you can download the studio and do that. And again, to get to that, we can just go to PowerApps.Microsoft.com. And here you sign up for it, and again, it's free to sign up. Just make sure you use a corporate email address, and then when you're in there, you can go ahead and download the different versions. You can connect to the data. Yeah, somewhere here. Yeah, here we go. You got PowerApps Studio. download from the Windows Store, or you can do it web-based, which is what I'm doing here. So that's how to get at that. And I don't need that. Okay. All right. So what we've done now is we've edited this first form, and so the next thing we would probably want to do is update the other parts of it. So in here, instead of sheet 1, I'm going to just call it Michigan Chambers. Update that. I'm going to and then I'm going to go to the display, and again, these are all independent. So I'm going to call this Michigan Chambers again, and in here we're just going to edit these so we can put in spaces here. Contact us form. And email address, we'll spell that out. Okay, and by the way, in this view, which is basically the read-only view, they call it the detail. This is called a card. So you got your label and then the text field there, even though it's not editable. But this is called a card. That's a single card. This contact name with the name, that's another card. So those are called cards. And then we've got the third view is where it's actually editable. And so in here, we're going to make the same, whoops. Michigan Chambers, and we're going to make those same edits here. And again, these are, just keep in mind that each of these views are separate. And you can also, you don't have to show these. So for instance, if we don't care about seeing contacted by, you can go over to the properties and you can tell it, there's a lot of different options, different colors. And so this where we have contacted by, all I have to do is click on the little eyeball, and now it's no longer shown. And so, and we can click on it to add it back in. Notice that it added it on the bottom instead of where it had been, which is fine in this case. All right, cool. And that's how we edit the 3 different things. And how are we doing on time? It's 1:45. So I'm going to check to see if anybody had any. I don't see any chat questions. So we've talked about connecting to your a Google spreadsheet, and then we've talked about editing your Power App. We've talked about creating a flow, which automatically sends to an email, and then the last let me think about that. Yeah, the connections and see what choices we have there. For that, yeah, because this does not have SharePoint. build it. So that's a great question. I've not done it any other way. Self down below. All right, cool. Thank you. I'm not sure. Is there, Lucy, do you know if there's a messaging area within the PowerApps user group site that for questions like this, like that are after the fact, is there a place that we can put those? We may have a little blog area or something like that. If not, John, I'll reach out directly to you. Just to verify, make sure that you have my email address. And again, just use Andy@WorkSmartDB.com, John, and that way I'll know. Just send me an email just so I have that.
Andy, we do have the contact page where people can go in and they can reach you that way.
Oh, okay. That's great. Good. That'll be good. Yeah. All right. So that's a good question.
Actually, that's the wrong group. I'll just
yeah, that's the SQL Server.
That's the SQL Server
group,
right
which is also a very, very good group. I think that one's still run by Juan Soto, and he does an excellent job.
Because I'm actually on that page at the moment working on it. That meeting is going to be on Thursday this week, and it's going to be Ben Clothier speaking about a book that they've just released recently on SQL Server.
Oh, cool. All right, good. Have to check that one out. All right, cool. So we're going to go back in to our app again. Let's see if we still have it up here. Yep, here we go. And so the other thing that might be fun to do would be to add audio to your data set. And so what I want to do is just kind of show you how to go about doing that in case you decide to add that audio later on. One quick thing before I forget is that if you remember before when we were talking about if we're connected to a Google Sheet that has spaces in it for the column names, which end up becoming field names. If there's spaces, it turns into the X0200. If you ever have a case where you have description 1, description 2, description 3, it'll at the end of that, it may look a little strange because what it's going to do is say product X0020 underline description X0020, and then the next one will be X0020 underline 0 X0020 underline 1. So that's how it'll actually come to blank and then 0 and then 1 as that. And so if you ever have a field that is more than 32 characters, and if you think about that space ends up becoming an underline X0020 and then another underline. That's 7 characters. And so if you get two spaces, that's 14 characters. And so if you ever have a field that has 32 or more characters, including spaces, it's going to truncate those and add those X 0020 underline 1, underline 2, underline 3, and so that may not look good, especially if you have things like company name, company contact, company address, things like that. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And so, all right, so we'll do one more fun thing here, and let's say that we want to add the ability to put in media. So I'm going to click on Insert, and then Media, and under here I'm going to click on Microphone, and then I can drop that down below, and this is where we'll be able to record something. So I haven't attempted doing this at the same time of doing Skype because I'm not sure if they'll both allow me to use the same headset for both, but we'll give it a shot. So this is a test. All right, possibly it did it. So we'll check that out. So now we've got this control added to go ahead and record information, but it's not showing any information. And so in order to show that information, we need to, go back into media, wrong spot. Insert. Actually, we have to do one thing first. We have to add a custom gallery, which I will make vertical. And so a gallery is where you can actually look for multiple items. And so in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to record, we're going to look at the different audio parts that we're adding. So it says add an item from the Insert tab. I can either grab that or click here. And we're going to go ahead and grab Media, and we can grab Audio. And so it's going to add that in here. And so now we're going to run this again. This is a test. And let's see. Okay, so good. So now we need to make this field connected to this this button. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to close this. And then I'm going to call this, let's change the name of the microphone. Before you rename it. And I'm audio one, which is fine. All right, hold on tight. My mind went blank, so let me see if I can find the answer quick. This is odd, it's not. Bear with me for a second. because we definitely. I want to make sure I get this right because there's a specific way to name this, and I don't want to mess it up. Come on. It's weird. All right, here we go. Phew, gosh. Like, and property where we're going to collect the information that's there. So I'm going to copy and paste this. I'll actually I'll put the instruction in there in a second. So we're going to add that to this. So here it says on stopped. We're going to collect my sounds, my mic audio. Within this, instead of audio one, let's see. So here's the gallery, and for the gallery, we're going to call this my sounds. Oops. And then, let's make sure I have that right. Then property, my mic. And then for this, we're grab it. Whoops. This item dot. All right, let's test it to see if it works now. I think that's all. I think that's all we need to know. We're going to run this. And this is a test. And so now, so it added that control. I don't know. You could, I don't know if the people there could hear that or not. Tell me in the chat window if you could hear. In the time while you're doing that, we want to make this so that it's pictures of those. You can see them, hear the different audio. You can look at this way. So we're bumping up. We're actually just a little over 2 already. So I'll yeah. So go ahead and unmute now, Lucy, and go ahead and stop. Yourself. All right, John has to go. Well, I appreciate Sandy. You can kind of see how those work, because they're a little bit different than when you're looking at like formulas that you see in Excel.